The vanilla RedMagic 7 already released internationally earlier this year, and while it received some major performance improvements, it was largely similar to what we've already seen from Team Red in the past few years. And that's because they've been holding back on all new changes for this, the RedMagic 7 Pro, which has finally made its way to the global market. The RedMagic 7 Pro not only looks and feels different, but is the world's first gaming smartphone to use an under-display selfie camera, and is RedMagic's first device to incorporate a dedicated gaming chip known as the Red Core 1, which helps alleviate stress from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU. The RedMagic 7 Pro comes in two main color variants, that being Obsidian Black and Supernova, which is actually transparent. There's a $100 difference between the two, since the Supernova version has twice the amount of storage. The Obsidian Black version, which is the one I have here, is the only one which has RGB lights on either side of the device. The Supernova transparent version doesn't have these lights. Instead, it has an RGB fan. But we're focusing on the Obsidian one here. It's nice and sleek, a little more subtle than other gaming phones around. So it's pretty much for those who don't want everyone to know that they are a true gamer at heart. And moving on to the Supernova one, my personal favorite one, since it's all out there, filled with flair, has that RGB LED fan. And yes, the Obsidian one also has an active fan inside of it, just like this one, but you can see it in the transparent version, obviously, since it's transparent. I like all the little writings and icons that you can see with the transparent version. Obviously, these components aren't the actual components, but the fan is actually the fan that is spinning at 20,000 revolutions per minute, which is insane. And we have a new ICE 9.0 multi-dimensional cooling system in here. It looks absolutely fantastic, and when comparing it to the vanilla RedMagic 7, which is $100 cheaper than this one, they look pretty similar, but we do have that aviation grade aluminum frame in the middle of the 7 Pro, which really makes it sparkle, and that new camera module alignment as well. We do have a 5000 mAh battery packed in here, which is 500 more milliamps than the vanilla RedMagic 7, but we have the exact same 65 watt wide charging. We of course have a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU in here, and something new to the Pro variant is the Red Core 1 dedicated gaming chip. The front is protected by Gorilla Glass 5. We have an aviation aluminum frame wrapping around the device and an aviation aluminum backplate in the center of the transparent or Obsidian Black color variants, and of course around that shroud is a glass back. In that newly designed camera module sits an 8 megapixel ultra wide sensor, 64 megapixel main, and 2 megapixel macro. This is the exact same sensor setup that we saw on the RedMagic 7 earlier this year. And just like the regular RedMagic 7, it doesn't take the best ultra wide shot. It takes a fairly decent 64 megapixel main shot, and even better when it's binned down to 16 megapixels using 4:1 super binning. We have 2 times digital zoom over here, which looks alright. 5 times doesn't look the best, and 10 times is of course the max zoom, and you can still kind of make out what you're seeing over here. We also have that 2 megapixel macro sensor, and though it does pick up details close up, it's not the best quality I've seen around. And we do have a bokeh portrait effect, which does a pretty decent job at edge detection. Of course, we can also record video at 8K 24 FPS, and if you don't actually know this, RedMagic was one of the first companies ever to use 8K in the RedMagic 3 device. We also have 4K 60 FPS, which is nice and buttery smooth, and all the colors are really poppy thanks to AI. And we also have 1080p at 60 frames per second over here, but once again, no ultra wide video, even though there is an ultra wide camera. Not sure why they haven't fixed this still, but it is what it is, and the back cameras are what they are. This is a gaming phone, and comparing the actual build to the vanilla RedMagic 7, you can see the 7 Pro is a lot boxier, a lot more squared off, and I really do prefer it. They've finally changed the design language of a RedMagic device, that being the RedMagic 7 Pro. It looks absolutely fantastic and feels great in the hand. We do have a dual SIM 5G tray with a water resistant seal over here, no room for expandable storage, USB 3.0 Type-C ports, and we have the first dual stereo speaker at the bottom, second one at the top. It also has an opening for that speaker right at the top of the phone, which is not really there on other RedMagic devices, as well as a headphone jack. On the left, we have a game space switch, which we've seen on all previous RedMagic devices, but for the very first time, there is no intake fan vent on the left-hand side. There is an exhaust fan on the right-hand side. That air duct is an intake at the back, just like we saw on the regular RedMagic 7, which means there is only one way for air to get into the phone, and that is from the back air duct, nothing on the side. So if it's on a flat surface, it's not going to do the best. We do have those new touch shoulder triggers, which have 500 Hertz touch sampling rate and an 8 millisecond response time, but they don't have the indents that we saw on the vanilla RedMagic 7. So it might be a little bit harder to feel for them, but they're still just as responsive and just as quick and snappy. And they do have a bit of an indent over there. This is the first gaming smartphone to have an under display selfie camera ever. And it looks absolutely fantastic. We'll get more on the technology later on, but it is 16 megapixels, which is a bump up from the vanilla version's 8 megapixel selfie cam. And it looks okay. I mean, it's an under display selfie camera, but I have seen other under display selfie camera smartphones that take much better photos than this. This is Technic recording a 1080p at 30 FPS video on the global version of the RedMagic 7 Pro. And yes, of course, this phone does indeed have an under display selfie camera. So first and foremost, let me know what you guys think of the video quality when recording with the selfie cam. And of course, also let me know what you think of the audio quality. So the photos and videos are definitely a bit of a mixed bag, and you can kind of see the under display tech over there. I mean, of course, you're always going to see it if you really look for it, but you really have to look for it. If you're just using it, you're never going to notice that it's there. And powering on the device, of course, we do have that in-display fingerprint sensor, which is unchanged, still nice and snappy. And of course, 2D face unlock, which works pretty well, I must add, with that under display selfie camera over there. It does not look like a gaming phone, especially when compared to previous RedMagic devices. And that under display camera tech is fitted with a multi-drive ACE circuit for light transmission, wave electrodes for image quality, and an under-display camera pro chipset for precise imaging. You really won't notice the under-display camera over there, whether you're on a black screen or a white screen. But if you really go in slow-mo and you really try focus on it like I'm doing over here, you can kind of see the pixels around the under-display selfie camera when you switch from a dark to a light shade. I mean, this is apparent on all under-display camera smartphones, but when you're just using it, you're never going to notice it, and it looks absolutely fantastic, a truly uninterrupted experience. Other than that, the display is 6.8 inches, so same size as the vanilla version. It is AMOLED, it is Full HD Plus with 100% DCI-P3 color gamut rating and 700 nits of peak brightness. But because of the new under-display camera tech, RedMagic have had to dumb down the refresh rate to 120 Hertz, as opposed to the 165 Hertz on the RedMagic 7. Though it seems like a big drop down, I honestly don't really notice much of a difference at 120 Hertz, and this time you are actually getting a beefed up 960 Hertz multi-finger touch sampling rate, which is fantastic for gamers like you and me. Of course, we can adjust different brightness levels, put on sunlight mode, we can change different color temperature settings within the display settings, and put on anti-flicker mode as well as night light mode. And we do have dark mode for nice, deep, rich blacks, which do affect the wallpaper, third-party apps, and of course, a few first-party apps as well. And moving over back to the light side of things, we do have RedMagic OS version 5 skinned over Android 12. It is the most stock-like experience I have ever seen on a gaming smartphone, but we do have a few extra gaming features which make it a gaming phone, and of course all Google services do indeed come pre-installed. The haptics are absolutely fantastic due to that dual axis haptic motor, but what about those dual stereo speakers? Let's go ahead and give them a listen. And now it's time to give those speakers a listen while playing some games.
And see if the gods respond.
Another thing worth mentioning about this device before we get into gaming is that 20,000 revolutions per minute turbofan, which you can clearly see lit up in all its glory thanks to the transparent color that I have over here, intake vent on the back and exhaust on the right side of the device. But how loud does it get? And of course, with a flick of a switch, we can switch to game space, which looks largely similar to all the other game spaces we've seen on RedMagic devices in the past. And we do have Magic GPU 2.0, as well as Game Space 5.0 overlay, where you can change up the touch sampling rate, performance. You can change up the colors that each game has in terms of different filters. There are pop-ups. You can change your refresh rate while you're playing games. There is a performance monitor tool over here, which is great, and you can see your FPS with it. And of course, we also have charge separation so that your phone doesn't drain while you're running it. It doesn't damage the battery. We do have those touch shoulder triggers at the top, which can do a bunch of different things, such as single press, long press, multi-press, whole bunch of different things. I like the plain and simple ones, and it works just as intended. We also have a macro key binding over here, which is great. You can tap a bunch of different inputs and then hit one button and it goes through those inputs once more. And the first game that we're going to be testing out is Genshin Impact here on the highest possible graphics with the max available FPS, which is 60 FPS since this game is capped at 60 FPS. The phone can go up to 120 FPS, but the game is capped at 60. So we're getting between 52 and 61 FPS. Over 60, which is nice to see. But the vanilla RedMagic 7 was getting between 60 and 62, so slightly more stable, but this is a hell of a lot more stable than the average FPS Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 powered smartphone on my channel, which gets between 34 and 58. Next up, we have Bullet Force over here. Once again, ultra graphics, max FPS, but this game does not have a frames per second cap, so we're getting between 116 to 121 frames per second, whereas the RedMagic 7 got between 167 and 168 FPS, but that's because it had a high refresh rate panel of 165. This phone's refresh rate limit is 120, and the same thing can be said with Real Racing 3. It gets between 120 and 121, but it is more stable than the average Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 powered smartphone seen on my channel, which is still a big plus if you ask me. So I guess it's safe to say this thing games like an absolute monster, but what about benchmarks? And that comes down to the performance of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, which is supposedly 20% more powerful and 30% more power efficient. And when paired with that Red Core 1 dedicated graphics chip, it should make for some interesting results over here. I have propped it up on a stand since there is only one intake fan vent at the back and not one on the side anymore. And I have tested out the temperature and battery at the start of the test. We'll compare this at the end, and kickstarting things off here with AnTuTu version 9.3.5. And just to let you guys know, I do have the fan set to fast cooling over here. So the absolute quickest cooling it can do at 20,000 revolutions per minute, pumping through Geekbench version 5 over there and ending off with 3D Mark Wildlife this time around, getting to battery percentage. We drained by 12% with a 37.5 milliamp hour per minute drain, which is better than the vanilla RedMagic 7, which got 39 milliamp hours per minute. And when it comes to temperature, it added 24.8 degrees in Celsius. But guys, you've got to remember that it is now officially summer here in Shanghai, China, so things are generally a lot hotter. And when it comes to AnTuTu, it scored a whopping 1,045,777 points, but the RedMagic 7, the vanilla version, did beat it, but only by a smidge with 1,050,000 points. And when it comes to Geekbench version 5, while the RedMagic 7 Pro got one of the highest single core scores I've ever seen at 1,239 points, the RedMagic 7 beat the Pro model when it comes to multi-core score here with 3,808 as opposed to the 7 Pro's 3,653. And last but not least, 3D Mark Wildlife. Focusing on GPU over here, the RedMagic 7 Pro blew every other device I've ever tested out the water with 10,105 points and an average frame rate of 60.5, which is 2 frames per second higher than the average Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 powered smartphone on my channel, which is absolutely incredible. RedMagic have finally mixed things up this year with the RedMagic 7 Pro. It now has a more boxy design, which I actually prefer. It's still built like a tank, and while the transparent version shows off all of its components, it also holds together the aviation aluminum backplate. Sitting on top of that backplate is a newly designed camera module, and while it may look different, the sensors inside of it are exactly the same as previous RedMagic devices, and there is still no option for ultra-wide video recording. But at the end of the day, this is a gaming phone, and the main camera still takes more than decent photos and videos. The optical in-display fingerprint sensor is still nice and snappy, and RedMagic OS 5 skimmed over Android 12 is still a great stock-like Android experience, which comes packed with a few extra features that reminds users this is still a gaming phone to the core. And while the screen refresh rate has been lowered to 120Hz, which is still extremely high by the way, display, the touch sampling rate has seen a jump up to an insane 960 Hz, and when paired with the impeccable gaming software through the flick of a switch, an improved cooling system, 16 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM, 6 gigs of RAM expansion, and the all-new Red Core 1 dedicated gaming chipset that relieves the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU of extra stress, leads to a gaming experience like no other. But what truly makes this device so unique is the new under-display camera tech, which complements the stunningly uninterrupted 6.8-inch AMOLED display. Which leads me to say that no matter which color variant you decide to pick up, the RedMagic 7 Pro is the most innovative, most daring, most enjoyable gaming smartphone I have ever used.